Hello and welcome to my fifth tutorial in the VEXcode IQ Blocks tutorial series. Today we are going to be looking at the touch LED. So this is a really useful component in your VEXIQ kits. It's both an input and an output. So the touch LED has got this white rim that you see around here. This is the LED part of the component. In there there's what we call an RGB LED, so it has a red, a green and a blue component, and this works very similar to the way that a pixel on an LCD television or monitor works. So by using those three colours that they're inside the LED and varying the brightness of each, you can achieve pretty much any colour. So the touch LED itself, each component, the red, the green and the blue, has 255 different brightness levels. So the amount of different colours is technically 255 times 255 times 255. So there's a lot of colours. Now practically in VEXcode IQ blocks, you have access to 14 predefined colours, but in other programming languages you can get many more colours by precisely controlling the brightness of each of those LEDs. So the output side is that RGB LED, something that we can set to any colour, and it's really useful for communicating information back from your robot about where it is in a program. So you could sort of set it on a traffic light system, red, amber, green, depending on the status of a program, for example. And you as a user, some distance away from the robot and maybe not able to see the LCD screen of the robot, are getting some feedback from it. The other part of the touch LED is this top area here, the grey area where the VEX logo is, and that's a capacitive touch sensor. So we can use that to trigger parts of our program and use that as an input on the program. Now the great thing about this is it needs to be pressed by really a human touch, or by a stylus, for example, from a tablet would also trigger it. But pieces of VEX plastic or game objects and things like that won't trigger it. So you don't need to be so worried about it being externally mounted on your robot, which is something we'll talk about a bit later. Okay, let's dive into VEXcode and start looking at how we configure a touch LED. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just using it on this brain that I've got on my desktop at the moment, just so we can have a bit of a play with it and see what it can do. So what I'm going to do is go into the devices menu, and I'm going to add a touch LED. So on mine I've got it into port 11, so I just need to find the touch LED, add that into port 11. It'll give it a name by default, touch LED, and then what port it's plugged into. You can rename that if you want to. I'm just going to get rid of the 11 just so it's called touch LED on mine, because it's the only one I'm going to have. And then I can minimize that. And let's have a look at the code blocks that gives us. So they will appear in three places. The first one is under looks. So if we're the looks menu here, we've got these three blocks that relate to the touch LED. So you've got set color, set fade and set brightness. We'll have a look play with those in a minute. Under sensing, you'll have this block. So touch LED pressed. That's a Boolean block, so a true or false output. Is it pressed, yes or no? And you see the shape of that in a minute. You'll be able to see that fits into the if else statements and that kind of thing. So there we go. We've got an input there, and the final place you'll find it is under events. And it can be an event. It can trigger an event, and we'll talk about that later on as well. And so when touch LED pressed is triggering an event there. So I'm just going to start with the basics. How do we make it light up? Well, we're going to go back to looks. And it's this block we're interested in, set touch LED color. And as I mentioned earlier, there are some predefined colors that you can use in VEXcode IQ blocks, and they are in this drop down here. So the options for the various colors are here. So I think it's about 14 different colors, something like that you can choose from. And you also have none. So none is off, and selecting one of the colors will both switch it on and set it to that color. So let's go super simple initially. We're going to set it to red. Then I'm going to put a brief 3-second wait in. And then I'm going to have another set color block. And I'm going to set it to green. So this program will just set it to red, wait 3 seconds, set it to green. let's give that a quick name. So we'll call it Touch LED. And I want to save that to my brain. I don't mind which slot it goes in at the moment because all the slots on my brain are blank. So I'm going to put it into one. Hit download. And there we go. That's now downloaded onto my brain. So there's my Touch LED. If I run that program, it lights up red, waits 3 seconds, and then it lights up green. And there we go. Simple as that. So that's how we can light the LED up. Let's have a look at some of the other boxes that we've got for the LED side, the output side of the Touch LED. So back over to the code, we've got set Touch LED fade. Now if we look at that block, the options there are slow, fast and off. And that's basically just like an aesthetic function. It's a transition. So if you change one color to another, it will fade between those colors either slowly, in a very quick way, or not at all, just switch from one to the other. So that's just to set the way that your LED transitions from one to the other. And this one, set Touch LED brightness, is exactly as it says, just the brightness of the LED, how brightly it is going to shine. So let's set a few blocks there just to show that. So I'm going to just right click on a block and duplicate it. It will duplicate everything below that point just because I want the same thing 3 times. But I'm going to start at, let's say we'll just start 10%, and then we'll go up to 40%, or let's say 50%. We might not be able to see the difference between these on the camera, but we'll see how it shows. So we're starting off by setting the Touch LED brightness to 10%. And having it red. In fact, we're going to have it red every time just so we can see that brightness increasing every 3 seconds. So here we go. Let's download that. And then if I run that program, so there's 10%, brighter now, 50%. And you can't really see on the camera the difference between the 50 and the 100%, but it's gradually getting brighter. So again, it's an aesthetic thing. You could use it for sort of making your own fades, or for making blinking arrays and disco lights and that kind of thing. So another useful feature for aesthetics. Now let's have a look at the sensing side. So the input side of the Touch LED. Let's get rid of those blocks there. And I'm first going to use the one under sensing, which is this one, the Touch LED pressed button. I'm going to drag that in. And as I mentioned earlier, that is it's a Boolean, it's a true false block. So I can fit that into an if or an if then else statement. I'm going to use the if then else statement. And you can see there that shaped block, that means I can drop this one inside it. And all I'm going to do is read the information from that sensor, and if it's pressed, set the color to green, for example, and if it's not pressed, set it to red. So I need to put that inside a forever loop because I want to be continually checking whether the Touch LED has been pressed or not. So I'm going to drop that inside there. And then under my looks, I'm going to have 2 set colors here, one in the if and one in the else. And if it's touched, it's going to be green. And if it's not any other status, so not touched basically, else, it's going to be red. Now let's attach that onto there. Download. And let's run that. So when I run the program, at the moment, the input of the Touch LED is not being touched, and so therefore the output is red. And as soon as I touch it, it goes green. So it needs just lightest of touches because it's this capacitive touch sensor on the top, much like your sort of mobile phone screens and that kind of thing. So there we go, that's triggering it. And if I get a piece of, here goes a piece of VEXcode plastic, unlike the bumper switch, for example, where if you're using a bumper switch, that would be pressing it. The great thing is that this doesn't trigger it. So We'll talk a bit about having that mounted on your robot later on. But there we go. So that's using that as an input. The other function you have is to use it as an event. So an event is something that triggers a thread running in the program. And here we go. Let's get this block here. So if we go to events, and when touch LED pressed is much like your when start block. Now the thing to remember about events is, I think we've discussed this in one of the previous videos, they can be triggered at any time. So as long as your program is running, this can be triggered at any point and could interrupt other parts of your program. So you need to consider the difference between using this block and using an event to trigger something. But let's have a look at the difference here. So if I say, set my program up like this. So I've still got my when start block. When the program starts, it will set the touch LED to red, and then it will just sit there and wait. If at any point I touch the touch LED, then it's going to go green. So let's download that. But this isn't in a continual loop, so it's never going to go back to red again. Run that program. So there I've got my red, which is this part here. So when the program has started, we've turned the LED to red. And now if I touch the LED, it's going to be this part here. Touch LED pressed, and then it will set it to green. So there we go, gone to green. But when I let go, we're not going back to red, because there's at no point in this program is there anything to say when it's released. We do have a released option in the drop down here. So I guess what we could do is add another event, which is released. And we could set ourselves back to red then. So now let's run that. So we're red, green, and we're released again. So we're back to red. So serving a similar function to what I did earlier, where I put it in the forever loop and had the if and else statement, that's very similar. But like I said, you've got to remember that these events can be triggered at any point in the program. And so you just need to take that into account when you're building your code and what those functions do, what those events actually trigger. So that's the basics of the touch LED, how you configure it and how you control the color and the sensor on it, so actually detect whether it's been pressed or not. Let's have a look at it actually on a robot. So if I just switch to my robot view here. So I've got my Flex robot that I've been using for all of the videos so far, and on the top here I've got a touch LED mounted. And I mentioned earlier about the touch LED needing to be touched by really a human finger or hand or whatever to trigger it. And that's a really useful function, because that means by having this mounted up here, it's not going to get knocked by in a mid-match by another robot or by a game object or by colliding with a bit of the field hardware. So it is a really useful way for you to trigger parts of your program externally on your robot, much easier than using the brain to do it. Because so especially on the Flex robot, and this is the same for a lot of the way people build a lot of their robots. The brain is right down in here. It's underneath the lift mechanism. If I want to get to the buttons on that, I've got to lift this up out the way. If I want to run a different program, I've got to do that. So by using touch LEDs out here, it's a much easier way for you to trigger parts of your program. So let's stick some code on this robot now so that you can see that in action. Okay, super simple. So firstly, I need to configure the motors and the drivetrain on the robot. So you'll have seen this in some of the earlier videos. So I'm going to add a 2-motor drivetrain. For my Flex build, the left motor is in port 1 and the right motor is in port 12. My gyro is in port 4. And if you remember from my earlier videos on this, the Flex robot needs the drivetrain to be reversed so that otherwise when you tell it to go forwards, it will drive backwards. So that's just ticking this little changing the color of this arrow here. So this is the front of the robot. That's my drivetrain configured. And I added another motor for the lifting arm. So a motor here. My lifting arm is in port 10. I'm going to rename it arm, give it a nicer name, makes more sense. And that's all I need to do. I'm not adding a controller for this because I'm going to show you it triggering some autonomous code. Okay, I can minimize my devices screen now. And all I'm going to do is use that touch LED just to make my robot move forward and lift its lifting arm up. I mean, you can obviously make much more complex programs off it, but just for the demonstration purposes, that's all we really need to do. Now, if you remember from the previous videos we had on setting up autonomous or basic drivetrains and things like that, we need to set the motor to holding mode. So what I'm looking for here is set arm stopping. I'm going to attach that to my when start because this will just happen right at the start of the program, and I'm going to put it in holding mode. That means when I tell my arm to go up to a given position, it'll just stay there until I tell it to move to another position. So it's going to kind of hold itself against the force of gravity or whatever weight is on the lifting arm. So there we go, set my arm to hold mode, and then I'm going to turn the touch LED on red. So I need to go to looks, set touch LED to red, and there we go. So that's the initial configuration. That's all I want there. I'm then going to use an event to trigger some basic movement of the robot. So that's my when start. All I'm doing is setting the arm to hold, turning the touch LED on, and then I'm going to have another event which is when touch LED is pressed. And at that point we want the LED to go green to let us know that it's been pressed. So we will do under looks again, set touch LED color to green. And then at that point, we're going to make the robot drive forwards. So it doesn't really matter what it does here. Let's say we're going to drive forward. I like to work in millimeters. So drive forward, just do 300 millimeters forward. We're not going to travel too far. Then I'm going to have it swing 90 degrees to the left. Drop this down and change to left. So swing 90 degrees to the left. And then I'm going to raise the arm up. So that's under my motion. Here's my arm. I'm going to spin it to... I'm going to work in turns because I recall from one of my earlier videos that I think is 0.9 turns to go to the full lift. So I'm going to go to 0.8 turns, just take it most of the way up. And then what we want to do is when that has finished, we're going to set the touch LED to another color to signify that it's finished. In fact, I'll show you something else. This is a little way that you can make it blink. So what we're going to do is put a repeat loop in here, and we're going to make it blink on and off 5 times when the program's complete. So we need to change this repeat loop to repeat 5 times. Just prior to that, we'll set our touch LED to orange. We'll repeat 5 times. Actually, this can be inside the loop, sorry, because we're going to turn it on and off. So we're going to set it to orange. Wait for half a second. Then we're going to set it to none. If you remember, none is off. And again, we're going to wait half a second. And it's going to do that 5 times. So it's just going to blink the LED 5 times, half a second on, half a second off with the color orange. And then that will show us that we've got to the end of the program. Right, let's download that to the robot. Let's grab a USB cable there. Turn the robot on. And we'll put that in slot 1, that's fine. Download. Okay, let's put this on the field, and then I'll switch to my robot view so we can see that. Okay, so this is my touch LED here on the top of the robot. If I run that program The touch LED lights up red, so it's there illuminated red now on the top of the robot, and it's sitting there waiting for this now to happen. So it's executed the 2 lines that are underneath the when start, so the arm is in holding mode. Touch LED is red. Now it's just waiting for that touch LED to be pressed before executing the rest of the code. And as I said earlier, it's much better than trying to sort of off the menu right down to move down to the right program and run it. Okay, as I press that, it goes green. We drive forwards 300. We turn on 90 degrees. And I think I've probably told it that the gyro is in the wrong port, because we're just spinning around there. Let's have a look. Let's have a look. My gyro. What I'm doing here is I'm just going into the settings menu just to check that my gyro is in port 4 and it's working. So I'm going to go to System Info. Device Info. Down to port 4, which is where my gyro is, and just check that's working. So actually here, so this is an interesting bit of fault finding. Let me see if I can show you this. It's going to be tricky. I don't know if you'll be able to see down inside there. No, it's going to be too difficult to see that. What I've noticed there is I've gone to the device info screen, gone down to my gyro, and as I'm turning it, the data's not changing. It is a gyro that's plugged in. It thinks the gyro is plugged in, but the data's not changing. So for some reason, it's not correctly picked up that the gyro is plugged in. So what I'm going to do is switch my robot off, turn it back on again. I'm going to go back into device info, down to port 4, which is my gyro. Yep, and now that data's working perfectly. So not quite sure what happened to the gyro there, but it's a really good fault finding exercise there to see why the robot turned continually. So there we go, we're on red, hit the button. Oh, sorry, I'm not on my robot view. Let's flick back to that so you can see what's going on. Robot focus. And do that again. So run the program, the touch LED comes on red. Touch it and it goes green. Signifies the program's running. There's our 90-degree turn. The arm comes up, and there's our blinking LED to signify that we've got to the end of the program. So that's 5 blinks there, and the program's finished. Now, quickly demonstrate something here. So the program has finished, but this is an event here, and so if I touch the LED, it's going to run that again. Now the arm is already up, so we probably won't see the arm movement part. But if you do this, look. There we go. 300 mil forwards. There's the turn. The arm's already in that position. And we've got our blinking LED again. So that's just something to remember about events. Until you stop the program running, so actually go onto the brain, press the cross button, press the X, that program is still running and those events can still be triggered. So there you go. That's most of the basics of the touch LED covered very quickly. Hopefully that's useful. Join us for the next video, which is also going to be a bit about colour. This is going to be using the colour sensor, which is absolutely vital in getting accurate autonomous programs, doing things like line tracking, detecting the colour of objects, so for object sorting and that sort of thing. So join us for the next video on the colour sensor. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video.